Alright, in this lesson we're going to work on finishing our smoke particle dynamics. Alright, so now we've got our particles shaded and behaving properly. So now what we need to do is create another set of particles for this other engine. Now, one of the nice things in 3ds Max is the fact that we don't necessarily have to go through this entire process of building this second particle system all over again. All we have to do is take this existing particle emitter and then just simply duplicate that. So I'm just going to switch to my front view up here, again just pressing Alt-W on my keyboard. Now with this emitter selected, I'm going to press and hold my Shift key and click and drag this over to the other engine. All right, once I let off my mouse, we'll go ahead and just set this to be a copy. And now if we were to scrub through the animation and play this back, we should now start to see two different sets of particles being emitted. Now at the moment, this second emitter should have identical properties to the first one. So you can see the particle emission, the shape, the movement, everything about these two particles is absolutely identical. Now in my case, that's actually not something that I want. We probably would not get two completely identical trails of smoke here. So I'm going to select this second emitter, go to its modifiers, and again you can see that it does carry over things like the gravity binding and any other forces that we may have connected to this first one. So with this one selected, I'll go into the super spray, scroll down, and let's take a look at the seed. This is kind of in the middle of this whole long rollout. Now the seed essentially just determines the actual distribution of our particles. So if we were to come in and just randomize this until we find something that is a little bit different, what it will do is essentially now just start to make these particles behave a little bit differently, just slightly different emission patterns, just so that we don't wind up with two completely identical trails of smoke. Okay, now what we want to do is take these two different emitters and actually link these to the movement of our engines. So if we scroll back to the beginning of our animation, let's take this first emitter, pull this back until it aligns right with the engine. Okay, now in order to link these together, I want to actually be able to grab this portion of the engine that currently I'm not able to select. If I were to press the F4 key on my keyboard, you can see that I'm not able to select this portion, whereas some of these other areas, once I select them, you can start to see the wireframe becomes white. So what I'm going to do is go into my layers, turn that on, and you can see that right now our PodRacer mesh is set to freeze, which means I basically can't select it. So I'm going to disable that freeze, and now I can come in here and select this portion of the engine. Alright, so I'll start by selecting the emitter itself. Let's move over, and I'm going to grab this select and link option. So the object that you have selected will be the child. So with this selected and this new tool active, I'm going to go ahead and just take this emitter, click, and drag it onto this little portion of the engine. And now what we should see is as this engine moves up and down, the emitter moves with it. Alright, excellent. So let's do the same thing for this other emitter. Just press the Z key on my keyboard to zoom into this and make sure that this is aligned pretty closely to the engine itself. There we are. And again, go back to my link tool, start by clicking on the emitter itself, click, and drag onto this new portion of our engine. And again, just looking at that, making sure the emitter does move properly. And that's exactly what we want. Excellent. So now, if I were to scrub through this animation, and now try to re-render this, you can now see our two separate streams of exhaust, and you can also see that this duplicate particle stream will also inherit any materials or anything that we had connected to the first one. So at this point, if we wanted to, we could now just take our PodRacer and then connect it back to the path. So if we want, we can just grab this PodRacer control object. With that selected, let's go back to the motion, take our path constraint, and set the weight back to 100%. So that way it should now be on the path. There we are. And now let's just scrub through our animation and make sure everything is still working properly. So as these engines are moving along this path, you can see that our emitters are following along very nicely. And if we wanted to, we could render this out and just, again, make sure everything is still working properly. Alright, very nice. And to render this, I just used my keyboard shortcut, which is going to be Shift-Q, to just render this out. So now it's a look at how we can now start to take our existing particle emitters and particle systems, duplicate those, and then connect those to any kind of a moving object.